The desert moon was quiet that evening, too quiet. Only the sound of the dry wind moved across the endless fields of silver dust. Lieutenant Mara Voss, a human engineer, stood alone outside the broken dome of Outpost Station 12. Her helmet lights cut through the darkness as she worked on a damaged solar panel. For weeks, no ship had come from orbit. Communication was dead. The storm season had fried every antenna they had. Mara was the only human left on this small mining base. She was tired, hungry, and almost out of patience. She bent over the tool crate and muttered, "One more fix and I'm done." But then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the desert wind. A small growl, soft but close. She froze. Her hand hovered over her tool. The growl came again, followed by the crunch of footsteps. Not the heavy stomp of a predator, lighter, quicker. Her helmet sensors picked up movement near the cargo crates. She slowly turned the flashlight toward the noise. Two bright eyes shone back at her. For a second, she thought it was a child, but it wasn't. The creature stood low to the ground, its fur striped with glowing blue lines, like energy veins. A predator cub, no taller than her knees, stared at her from the shadows. Mara whispered, "Well, you're not supposed to be here." The cub tilted its head. Its ears twitched at her voice. Then without warning it moved, fast. Before she could react, the cub leapt onto her supply box, grabbed something shiny from the ground, and darted into the dunes. Her heart dropped. Her helmet. "Hey! That's not a toy," she shouted, but her voice was lost in the rising wind. She ran a few steps after it, but the desert storm was beginning to build. The sky turned gray and red, lightning flickering in the distance. She couldn't risk going far without the dome's air support. She stood still, watching the small creature disappear into the swirling dust with her helmet in its jaws. Mara cursed under her breath. "Great, just great. Stuck here with a wild alien who likes stealing my equipment." She went back inside the station, sealing the door. The storm began to scream outside, shaking the walls. Inside, lights flickered as the backup generator coughed and hummed. Mara tried to keep working, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying the image. The cub's glowing fur, the strange intelligence in its eyes. It hadn't looked afraid. It had looked curious. She poured herself a cup of recycled water and sat near the small observation window. Outside, the world was a blur of red sand. Then something moved again. Through the dust, she saw a faint shape, a small shadow near the dome's outer wall. It was the cub. Mara leaned forward. "You've got to be kidding me." The creature was sitting on a mound of sand, her helmet lying beside it. The cub wasn't playing anymore. It was facing outward, staring into the storm, growling softly. Mara switched on the external mic. "Hey there, little thief. What are you doing?" No response, of course, but the cub didn't run away. It stayed right there, watching the storm like a guard on duty. Something about the scene made Mara uneasy. It looked almost like the cub was protecting the station. The sensors began to blink on her console. Movement detected, multiple signals. She frowned and adjusted the radar. The shapes were large, moving across the dunes, closing in on her position. "Could be just rocks shifting," she whispered, but her gut told her otherwise. She turned her gaze back outside. The cub was still there, standing tall now, fur bristling. It was growling louder, facing the storm. Lightning cracked across the horizon, revealing dark, heavy figures moving in the distance. Mara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Oh no, there's more out there. She quickly sealed all access doors and powered up the outer lights. The cub didn't move. It stayed in place as if daring the shadows to come closer. For hours the storm raged. Mara couldn't sleep. Every few minutes she checked the monitor, expecting to see the cub gone, but it stayed. Sometimes it paced. Sometimes it crouched low as if listening to something she couldn't hear. Finally, near midnight, the storm began to calm. The wind slowed. The dust settled. Outside, the cub was still there, its small form half buried in sand, the helmet glowing faintly beside it, reflecting the starlight. Mara opened the inner hatch and looked through the glass door, her voice soft. "You're still out there?" "Why?" The cub didn't move. But in that quiet moment, it lifted its head and looked directly at her. Their eyes met through the glass. For a heartbeat, she forgot that this was an alien world, that this was a creature of another species. Felt like something deeper, an understanding. And then something happened. The cub turned sharply toward the dunes and let out a low growl. Mara glanced at the motion tracker again. 3 new signals approaching fast. Her stomach tightened. Something big was coming. She stared out again, whispering to herself, "Don't tell me you're trying to protect me." The cub didn't look back. It stepped closer to her helmet, tail flicking as if ready for a fight. Lightning flashed again, and in that single flash Mara saw what was moving toward them. Huge shapes crawling on 6 legs, their bodies covered in spines, eyes burning with pale green light. The storm wasn't over yet, and neither was this night. End of Part 1, The Encounter in the Dust. Suspense carries forward into Part 2, The Signal and the Storm. Would you like me to now write Part 2, The Signal and the Storm? Same style, simple English plus suspense, mas 1,000 words. It will continue right after this cliffhanger scene. You said Part 2, ChatGPT said, perfect. Here's Part 2, The Signal and the Storm of your HFY Sci-Fi story. It continues directly after Part 1, written in third person with simple English, full of suspense and emotional connection to keep your YouTube audience hooked. The wind howled louder again as the storm returned, wrapping the outpost in red dust and lightning. Inside the small control room, Lieutenant Mara Voss stared at the radar screen. 3 large signals were still moving toward her station, slow, steady, and full of purpose. Outside, the predator cub stood firm, its small body glowing faintly blue under the storm's flashes. Mara could barely believe her eyes. That tiny creature, alone, was facing the direction of those incoming monsters. She whispered, "You're either the bravest thing I've ever seen, or the craziest." The power flickered again. The generator was weak, the comms were dead, and the outside cameras gave only fuzzy images. Mara adjusted the lens feed. The cub was still there, fur whipping in the wind, tail raised high, growling into the storm. Then the radar blinked red. The creatures were close now, maybe 50 meters. The air outside shimmered, shapes moved in the sand. Huge silhouettes crawled out of the darkness. 6 legs, spiny bodies, pale green eyes glowing like cold fire. Mara's breath caught. "Desert hunters," she muttered. "Those things tear apart anything that moves." She reached for her pulse rifle but stopped halfway. Through the crackling feed, she saw the cub take a step forward, its claws digging into the sand. It growled, a deep low sound that echoed unnaturally. The hunters hesitated. "What are you doing?" Mara whispered, eyes wide. The cub roared again, louder this time. The sound wasn't from a small animal. It was something bigger, something ancient. The air itself seemed to shake. Then lightning struck nearby, lighting up the battlefield for one heartbeat. Mara saw the cub standing between the outpost and the oncoming monsters, her helmet beside it shining bright under the flash. And then darkness swallowed everything again. The first hunter lunged. The camera feed glitched and sparked. Mara heard only faint screams and thuds from outside. She grabbed her rifle and ran to the airlock, heart pounding. "Hang on, little one." She opened the first hatch, but stopped before stepping into the storm. If she went out there, the wind would crush her lungs in minutes. Her spare helmet was cracked and leaking air. Her gaze fell on the cub outside. It was still moving, darting between the hunters, claws flashing, teeth snapping, lightning reflecting off its glowing fur. The monsters surrounded it, hissing and circling. Then she noticed something strange. Every time lightning flashed, the cub's glow became brighter, as if the storm's energy was feeding it. "Is it absorbing the lightning?" she whispered. The cub leapt high and struck one of the hunters' faces, making it fall with a screech. But there were too many. Mara couldn't just watch. She aimed her rifle through the small observation slit and fired. Bright blue bolts shot into the storm, hitting another hunter in the chest. It screamed, stumbled, and fell into the sand. The cub looked up for a moment, straight toward her window as if it knew she was helping. Then it turned back to fight again. Minutes passed like hours. The storm wind was thick with dust and lightning, the ground shaking under the hunter's weight. Mara's gun overheated. She dropped it and reloaded the power cell with shaking hands. Another flash, another roar, and then silence. She leaned forward, trying to see. The radar showed one last moving dot. Then it faded. Only one small blue glow remained on the screen. Mara exhaled shakily. "Please tell me that's you." She ran to the control panel and activated the floodlights outside. The harsh white light cut through the fading storm. There in the middle of the sand lay the cub. It was breathing barely. Her helmet was beside it, cracked and scorched from the battle. Without thinking, Mara opened the hatch and stepped into the storm's dying wind. The air burned her throat, but she pushed forward, stumbling through the sand until she reached the small body. The cub's fur was warm, too warm, like it had absorbed too much energy. Mara knelt and touched its head. "Hey, you did good, okay? You saved me." The cub blinked weakly, a low sound rumbling in its throat. Then its paw touched the helmet and pushed it toward her. Mara froze. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. It was giving it back. Her eyes widened. "You understand me, don't you?" The cub made a small soft sound, almost like a purr. Mara gently picked it up in her arms. It was heavier than it looked. She hurried back into the airlock and sealed the door, collapsing against the wall as the systems hissed and equalized. Inside, she laid the cub on a blanket near the heater. Its breathing was shallow but steady. Its fur still glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Mara placed the damaged helmet on the table and checked it. The visor screen was cracked, but the internal lights flickered on, showing strange alien symbols across the display. "What the?" she murmured. Lines of glowing text scrolled slowly across the visor. It wasn't human code. Then a faint voice came through the helmet's speaker, distorted but real. "They come for the humans. We guard the light." Mara froze. Who said that? The cub stirred slightly at the sound. The voice repeated, weaker this time. "We guard the light." The helmet shut off, leaving only silence and the hum of the storm fading outside. Mara sat beside the cub for a long time, listening to its slow breathing. She looked at its small claws, its fur marked by burn lines, its brave little body. It wasn't just an animal. It was something more, something ancient, something that understood loyalty. She whispered, "You didn't just save me, did you? You were guarding something bigger. Maybe all of us." Outside, the first dawn light broke across the desert moon. The storm clouds parted, revealing a pale golden sky. The world was quiet again. Mara placed her hand gently over the cub's head. "I don't know who you are," she said softly, "but you're not alone anymore." The cub gave a faint sound, half growl, half sigh, and closed its eyes. Mara smiled tiredly. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel afraid. She didn't know what would come next. But deep down, she knew one thing. This night would change everything. The desert moon was calm again, but Mara Voss couldn't rest. She sat near the heater, watching the small cub sleeping on a folded blanket. Its glowing fur had dimmed, pulsing faintly like a weak heartbeat. Outside, dawn painted the dunes in pale gold. Mara touched the broken helmet on the table. The visor still showed tiny cracks where lightning had struck it. But one thing bothered her more than anything, the voice she had heard through it. "We guard the light." Those words kept echoing in her mind. What light? What were they guarding? And how could this small alien cub possibly know about humans? She sighed and turned on the outpost sensors again. The radar screen was mostly clear, only soft static dots. But one small signal blinked on the edge of the map. Something or someone was still out there. Mara frowned. No rest for the tired. She checked the cub's breathing once more, then picked up her sidearm and stepped to the window. The desert was still, but she could feel a presence, a kind of pressure in the air, like she was being watched. The cub's ears twitched in its sleep. Then suddenly it opened its eyes, bright blue again. It stared toward the window, fur rising slightly. Mara whispered, "You sense it too, don't you?" She turned on the external cameras. At first nothing but sand. Then for a split second, a pair of glowing green eyes flashed across the screen. Then another, and another. Her pulse quickened. Oh no. They're back. The creatures she thought were gone, those giant hunters, had returned. And this time, they weren't alone. The sensors picked up at least 6 moving forms around the perimeter. They were circling the outpost silently. She quickly shut off all interior lights and crouched by the window. The cub stood on shaky legs, growling low. Its fur began to glow brighter again. Mara whispered, "Easy, little one." "Don't make noise," but the cub didn't stop. It walked toward the hatch door, eyes fixed on something outside. It wasn't afraid. It was angry. Mara followed, whispering, "You can't fight them again. You're still hurt." The cub looked back at her, and for one brief moment she felt it understood her words. Then it pressed its small paw against the helmet lying on the floor. The cracked visor flickered, and a faint holographic pattern projected into the air. A circle of symbols appeared, spinning slowly, and then an image formed. A tall shadow figure made of light with glowing blue eyes holding a staff. A voice, calm but distant, spoke through the helmet. "If you hear this, the Guardians have fallen. Protect the flame. Protect the humans." Mara's mouth went dry. "Guardians, flame. Is that what you are?" The cub growled softly in answer, then pressed its paw again. Outside, the sand shifted. The hunters growled back. It was as if they could sense the helmet's light. Mara grabbed her rifle and aimed it at the door. "I won't let them in." "Not this time." The creatures moved closer. Their shadows grew across the sand like dark waves. Through the camera feed, she could see their forms clearly now. Six-legged, armored bodies. Mandibles twitching, dripping with glowing slime. Suddenly, one of them rammed the side wall of the outpost. The metal screamed. Mara steadied her aim. "Come on then." The cub jumped onto the console, fur crackling with blue energy. Sparks flew from its claws as it stood beside her. Mara smiled nervously. "Guess we're in this together again." The creatures roared, slamming against the dome repeatedly. Cracks began to appear in the glass panels. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Mara fired through the view slit 3 shots. Each bolt lit up the storm outside. One creature fell, but the others kept coming. The cub let out a sound, a piercing howl that echoed far beyond the dunes. Then something incredible happened. The sand outside began to shimmer. From beneath the ground, small glowing shapes started to rise. Tiny lights, one after another. Mara blinked. "What? What is that?" The cub jumped down and pressed its paw against the floor. The lights grew stronger, spreading in a circle around the outpost like a protective shield. It wasn't just energy. It was a signal. Mara's console started to pick it up. Incoming transmission. Unknown frequency. Static filled the speakers at first. Then a voice broke through. "Station 12, human." "You are not alone." Mara's eyes widened. "Who is this?" The signal buzzed and the voice repeated, "Hold your ground. The Guardians are coming." Before she could respond, the ground shook violently. Outside, the hunters screeched as beams of blue light struck them from above. The sky rippled with new lightning. Ships small and fast, diving low through the storm clouds. The cub watched them, eyes shining. It let out a small roar, almost happy. Mara ran to the window. "You called them, didn't you?" The cub looked at her, then at the helmet, and nodded its small head once. Mara couldn't believe it. It understood everything. The hunters tried to flee, but the blue ships fired again, their energy slicing through the sand. Within moments, silence returned. Only dust floated in the air. Then one of the ships landed near the outpost. Its ramp opened with a hiss, revealing tall figures made of the same glowing material she had seen in the hologram. They looked like living light, armored in crystal, their movements calm and fluid. The lead figure knelt beside the cub, placing a glowing hand over its head. It spoke in a gentle tone that somehow carried through the glass. "Brave one, you did well." The cub made a low purring sound and leaned into the touch. Mara stepped closer to the door, heart racing. "Who are you?" she asked through the comm. The tall figure turned its glowing eyes toward her. "We are the Guardians. Your kind and ours share the same flame. This one protected it. And you?" Mara looked at the small creature beside him, now calm and breathing easily. Her chest tightened with emotion. "So it really was guarding me," she whispered. The Guardian nodded. "It guarded hope." The figure then looked up at the sky. "More darkness comes. Keep your flame alive, human." The cub gave one last look to Mara before following the tall figures up the ramp. The ship rose into the air, disappearing into the clouds, leaving only silence behind. Mara stood there, staring after them, unable to move. Her station was safe. She was alive, but her heart felt strangely heavy. She whispered into the quiet, "Goodbye, little Guardian." Outside, the dunes shimmered faintly where the shield lights had been, then faded away into the dawn, and somewhere in the distance, deep in the endless desert, a single pair of blue eyes still watched the horizon. The desert was calm again, but Mara Voss couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Hours had passed since the Guardians left. The small cub, Her tiny savior was gone with them, leaving the outpost strangely silent. She sat in front of the console, staring at the empty radar. Every system seemed stable now, every warning light green. But deep down, her instincts whispered, "It's not over." Outside, the wind was still. The dunes stretched endlessly under a red sky. Yet the air felt heavy, charged, like before a storm. Mara sighed. "You saved me, little one. But what did you wake up out there?" She tapped the cracked helmet resting on her table. It was still faintly glowing, even without power. Suddenly the light flickered, and a weak signal began to pulse on her screen. She frowned. "No, this frequency again?" It was the same alien channel the cub had activated earlier. The message repeated, broken and faint. "Flame. Compromised. Danger approaching?" Mara's heart skipped. Danger? What danger? Before she could trace the source, the lights in the room flickered violently. Then came the sound, a deep rumbling vibration that made the walls tremble. Something massive had entered the desert basin. She ran to the window. At first, she saw nothing but swirling dust. Then, far on the horizon, a dark shape moved, large as a mountain, crawling toward her station. Her mouth went dry. Oh no, it wasn't a creature. It was a machine. A black insect-like war machine walking on 8 legs, taller than the outpost itself. Its body glowed with green veins of energy, the same color as the hunter's eyes. Mara whispered, "They've sent a mother beast." The radar blared red. The ground shook with every step the monster took. The Guardians were gone, and she was alone again. She rushed to the weapons locker and grabbed her pulse rifle, along with 2 emergency power cells. Then she switched the outpost defense system to manual. Turrets whirred to life outside, but their small barrels looked useless against the size of what was coming. "Come on, Mara," she muttered. "You've been through worse, maybe." The creature stopped a few hundred meters away. Then, with a metallic roar, it began to dig its front claws into the sand. Suddenly, the ground split open. From the cracks, smaller creatures poured out, dozens of them, all glowing the same green. Mara aimed her rifle at the window. Here we go again. The first wave of hunters rushed the outpost. The turrets fired, cutting down a few, but there were too many. The walls shook as they slammed into the metal, clawing and hissing. Sparks burst from the panels. One turret exploded. Mara fired through the slit window, hitting 2 of them. Their bodies burst in green flame, but more kept coming. The whole room filled with the sound of metal scraping and alarms screaming. Mara's hands trembled, but she didn't stop. She fired again and again, yelling, "You want this place? You'll have to kill me first." Then a heavy thud echoed through the floor. The massive mother beast had reached the dome. It raised 1 leg high and slammed it down. The impact threw Mara across the room. The lights went dark. Sparks rained from the ceiling. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, through the broken window, a faint blue light flickered. Mara looked up weakly. The helmet on the table was glowing again, brighter than ever. Its visor came alive, showing alien symbols racing across the glass. "Guardian. Signal." Detected. Her eyes widened. "Guardian? You mean him?" Outside, the sand erupted. A streak of blue light tore through the darkness, followed by a thunderous roar. The cub had returned. It leapt from the dunes, landing between the mother beast and the outpost, fur blazing with electric blue energy. Its eyes glowed like twin stars. It was larger now, stronger. The storm energy had changed it. Mara watched, stunned. "You came back." The cub roared, and bolts of lightning burst from its body, striking the smaller creatures. They shrieked and burned in flashes of blue fire. The mother beast turned its head toward the cub and released a deep, mechanical roar. The ground cracked under its weight as it prepared to strike. The cub didn't back down. It raised its head, energy swirling around it like a living storm. Mara could feel the vibration even inside the station. The cub leapt high into the air and landed on the creature's back, tearing into the metal with glowing claws. Each strike sent arcs of light through the beast's armor. Mara grabbed her rifle again and joined the fight, firing at the smaller attackers swarming the dome. Her shots hit true, clearing a path for the cub to continue its assault. The outpost lights flickered on and off, flashing like a heartbeat in chaos. Mara shouted over the noise, "Come on! You can do it!" The cub's roar echoed through the desert. Lightning struck from the clouds, drawn to its body like a magnet. It absorbed the power, then released it in one massive blast of blue light. The explosion was deafening. The shockwave knocked Mara to the ground. When she looked up, the mother beast was gone, its body shattered, smoke rising from the dunes. The smaller creatures screeched and scattered into the distance, vanishing beneath the sand. Silence fell again. Mara crawled to the door and looked outside. The cub stood in the middle of the desert, panting, its glow fading. Then it turned its head toward her, eyes soft again. Mara stepped out slowly, feeling the warm desert wind brush her face. She walked up to the cub, tears in her eyes. "You saved me." Again. The cub leaned against her leg, tired but peaceful. Mara placed her hand on its head and smiled. "You're more than a guardian. You're my friend." The sky began to clear, stars appearing one by one. Far above, she saw a faint blue ship circling. The guardians had returned. Watching silently, a calm voice echoed in her calm. "The flame endures. Because of both of you." Mara looked up at the sky, then down at the cub beside her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. The desert was silent again. The smoke from the battle still floated over the dunes like ghosts. Mara stood beside the cub, both of them breathing hard, surrounded by the wreckage of what once was her quiet outpost. She looked down at the cub. It was smaller now, the blue glow fading from its fur. Its eyes blinked slowly, tired but calm. "You did good," she whispered, kneeling beside it. "You saved this place." The cub made a soft, rumbling sound, something between a growl and a purr. Then it limped toward the broken helmet lying in the sand. Mara frowned. "That thing again?" The helmet, the same one the cub had stolen days ago, was glowing brighter now. The glass visor shimmered like water, and faint symbols appeared on it, alien letters, but with a strange rhythm that almost looked human. Mara picked it up carefully. "What are you trying to show me?" The cub sat beside her, eyes locked on the visor. Then, without warning, the helmet projected a faint blue hologram into the air. A figure appeared, tall, armored, and unmistakably alien. Its voice echoed softly, calm and deep. "To the human who found this beacon, if you see this, the flame still burns." Mara's eyes widened. "Flame? You mean that word from the message?" The hologram continued. "We are the Kareth, keepers of the young. The one you hold, the cub, is not a creature of war. It is a seed of light created to guard worlds from what sleeps beneath them." Mara glanced at the cub. It tilted its head as if listening too. "Long ago, we placed guardians on every frontier planet. But the storms came. Our kind fell. Only fragments remain. If you are human, then you have found what we could not save." The projection flickered. Then the alien's voice grew weaker. "Protect the seed. It will awaken the next flame. When the darkness comes again, you must stand together." The hologram faded into static and vanished. Mara stood still, staring at the empty space where it had been. "Guardians on every planet," she whispered. "Seeds of light. You are not just an animal, are you?" The cub lowered its head and pressed its paw gently against her leg. Mara smiled sadly. "Guess we're both the last ones of something." She looked around. The outpost was half ruined. The antenna tower was broken, most systems down. But the helmet kept glowing, faintly pulsing in rhythm with the cub's breathing. "Maybe it's not over," she said quietly. "Maybe this was just the beginning." She carried the helmet back inside and placed it on the table. The cub followed her, limping slightly. Mara sat beside it, her mind racing. She had fought, survived, and learned that her companion was something ancient, something meant to protect life itself. But protect it from what? The message said, "The darkness comes again." Her skin went cold. She turned to the cub. "Do you know what it meant? What's coming?" The cub didn't answer, of course, but its ears perked up suddenly. It growled softly and stared at the radar screen. The screen, which had been dead since the attack, flickered to life again. A new signal was blinking on the edge of the display. Not green, not blue, but red. Mara's heart sank. "No." She tapped the console. The screen zoomed in, showing several red points moving fast across the desert. They were coming straight toward her position. She whispered, "It's too soon." "There's more of them." The cub stood up, eyes glowing faintly again. It let out a low growl, ready to fight. Mara clenched her jaw. "No, we can't fight them all again. Not this time." She looked back at the helmet. The blue light was still pulsing like it was waiting for something. "What are you trying to tell me?" she said. How do I use you? Then faintly words appeared on the visor. Signal link 2 required. 2 required? She repeated, glancing at the cub. The cub stared at her, then stepped closer to the table. Its paw brushed the helmet, and suddenly the light grew blinding. The hologram returned, but this time it wasn't a message. It was a map. A star map filled the room, glowing in shades of blue and gold. One of the dots pulsed in the center, her planet. But there were dozens of others, all linked by faint light lines stretching across the stars. Mara whispered, "All those worlds. The Guardians." The cub looked up at her. Its eyes reflected the same pattern of stars. She felt a sudden connection, a pulse between her mind and the creatures. Images flashed, battlefields, old worlds burning, and towering shapes rising from beneath oceans and deserts. Then one final image, a black sphere buried deep under the desert floor. Beating like a heart, Mara gasped, pulling her hand away. "It's under us. The darkness. It's already here." The map flickered, then focused on a single symbol near her outpost, a small beacon icon. A voice, softer this time, echoed from the helmet. "Awaken the flame before the shadow rises." The hologram disappeared. Mara sat back, her pulse racing. The cub was watching her closely. She looked at it and said, "I think I know what we have to do." She stood up, tightening her gloves. "We're not just defending this place anymore. We're going underground." The cub growled in agreement, tail flicking with light. Mara glanced one last time at the sky. A faint red glow was spreading on the horizon. The incoming enemies. She turned to the cub. "Let's finish what your kind started." The cub nodded once, and together they walked toward the dark tunnel leading below the station, where something ancient waited to awaken. The tunnel beneath the outpost was cold and dark. Mara's flashlight cut through layers of dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. The cub padded silently beside her, eyes glowing faint blue, lighting the path like twin lanterns. The air was heavy, almost humming with hidden energy. Each step echoed faintly through the long corridor, like the place itself was listening. Mara whispered, "This station was built over something ancient." They must have known. She glanced at the walls. Old markings, faintly glowing symbols in a language she didn't understand. Some looked almost human, but older, mixed with alien geometry. The cub growled softly. It stopped near a broken doorway where strange metal roots climbed out of the floor, pulsing faintly with blue light. Mara crouched down. "Looks alive. Like veins." The cub sniffed them carefully, then pressed its paw against the surface. The roots glowed brighter, spreading light down the hall. Suddenly the tunnel walls began to shift, the dust sliding away as ancient machinery awakened for the first time in centuries. Whoa! Mara stepped back as the ground trembled beneath her boots. A massive circular door appeared at the end of the tunnel. It was marked with a single symbol, the same one from the helmet. The cub let out a low growl that sounded almost like a warning. Mara took a deep breath. "We came this far. Let's finish it." She approached the door and touched its surface. Instantly, a burst of blue energy flashed through her hand, connecting her to the door. The metal began to move, spinning slowly as if recognizing her. The heavy panels opened with a hiss, revealing a vast underground chamber. Mara stepped inside, her eyes widening. The room was enormous, a hollow space carved deep beneath the desert. In the center stood a giant crystal structure, floating slightly above the ground, glowing with soft golden blue light. The flame. It pulsed slowly, like a living heart. Mara whispered, "So this is the flame they talked about." The cub walked forward carefully, its fur reflecting the golden light. As it approached, the crystal responded. Beams of energy extended outward, wrapping gently around the cub like light made of silk. The cub didn't resist. Instead, it closed its eyes and let out a small, calm sound. Mara took a cautious step forward. "What's happening?" A voice, not from the helmet this time, but from the air itself, filled the chamber. Soft, echoing, ancient. Guardian recognized. "Human chosen. The bond is complete." Mara's breath caught. "Bond? What bond?" The light from the crystal reached out again, touching her chest. She felt a rush of warmth, like sunlight and lightning mixing together. For a brief second, she could feel the cub's heartbeat. Not with her ears, but in her mind. She gasped. You can hear me?" The cub turned to look at her, and in her mind a voice, faint, young, and full of emotion, whispered, "Friend." Not alone, tears welled in her eyes. "You can talk?" "No talk, feel together." Mara smiled shakily. "Good enough." The chamber lights flared brighter. The crystal flame began to spin, energy flowing into the walls, powering long-dead circuits and machines. But the peace didn't last. The ground shook violently. Dust fell from the ceiling. Mara looked up in alarm. "What now?" The radar alarm from her wrist comm cracked to life. Warning, surface breach detected. Multiple hostiles inbound. Her stomach dropped. "They found us." The cub growled, fur flickering with faint light again. The voice of the chamber returned, louder this time. "The shadow rises. The awakening is incomplete. Protect the flame." Mara's pulse raced. "How do we do that?" "Join. Become one." Before she could ask what it meant, the cub leapt toward the flame. The energy flared bright white, surrounding it completely. The cub's small body was lifted off the ground, glowing, changing, growing. Mara shielded her eyes from the light. "No, wait." The light dimmed slightly, and she saw the cub's new form. Taller, sleeker, still glowing blue, but now with armor-like plates forming across its body. Its eyes burned bright gold. The same young voice echoed in her mind again. "Flame." Shared, she stepped closer, amazed. "You're part of it now." The ground trembled again, harder this time. The chamber doors behind her burst open. Dark smoke poured in, and from it came the red-eyed shapes of the enemy swarm. The same mechanical beasts from before, but larger, faster, crawling down the walls like spiders. Mara raised her pulse rifle. "You're not getting this flame." The cub roared, its voice deep and echoing with thunder. Lightning burst from its body, striking the first wave of enemies. The air filled with blinding flashes of blue and red. Mara ran beside it, firing shot after shot. The creatures fell, but more kept coming. The flame pulsed faster now, responding to their bond. Each time she fired, the cub's energy grew brighter. The ancient voice spoke again. "The Union strengthens the light. Protect until ignition." "Got it," Mara shouted. "We hold the line." The cub lunged forward, slamming into a massive enemy machine that had broken through the wall. Mara followed, jumping behind cover, reloading her rifle. The noise was deafening. Metal clashing. Lightning tearing through the air, explosions shaking the floor. But even through the chaos, she could feel the cub's presence in her mind. Calm, brave, determined. "We fight together." Mara smiled through the dust. "Yeah, together." With one final push, the cub unleashed a massive blast of blue energy, vaporizing the last wave of enemies. The entire chamber filled with brilliant light, and for a moment, it felt like the whole planet had stopped to breathe. When the dust settled, the floor was scorched, the walls cracked, but the flame still burned. Steady and strong, Mara dropped to one knee, exhausted. The cub, now glowing faintly gold, stood beside her. It pressed its head gently against her shoulder. She whispered, "We did it. We actually did it." Then the ancient voice returned, softer now, almost peaceful. "The flame endures. The shadow retreats. But the war is not over." Mara looked at the cub. "Not over? The other flames must awaken." The light of the crystal dimmed slightly, revealing new symbols along the walls. A map of stars, just like before, but this time glowing golden. Mara stared at it, realization dawning. Each light was another world, another flame, another fight waiting to happen. She exhaled slowly. "Guess our mission just got bigger." The cub tilted its head and gave a soft, approving growl. Mara smiled faintly, brushing the dust from her sleeve. "All right, partner. Let's save the stars." As they turned toward the tunnel, the flame pulsed one last time, sending a beam of light shooting up through the ceiling, piercing the desert sky above in the endless night. Distant stars flickered to life, one by one. The awakening had begun. The beam of light from the flame tore through the desert sky, reaching far beyond the clouds, beyond the atmosphere. In the endless dark above, it split into 1,000 smaller beams, spreading like veins of light across the stars. Mara stood beside the cub, both staring up at the impossible sight. Her heart pounded. She could feel the hum of the energy in the air. "The signal," she whispered. "It's calling the others." The cub's golden eyes reflected the sky, glowing brighter with every pulse. In her mind, she heard its quiet voice again. Flames. Waking. All across the planet, the ground trembled, but not in fear this time. Mountains glowed faintly. Crystals emerged from old craters. Forgotten stations lit up after centuries of silence. The Guardians were awakening. For the first time since the fall of the Kareth, the ancient defense network was alive again. Mara smiled, tired but amazed. "We did it. We really did." But the celebration didn't last long. The sky darkened suddenly, clouds twisting, turning red. From above, a shape appeared. Massive, silent. A ship unlike anything she had seen before. It wasn't Kareth. And it wasn't human. It moved like a living shadow, absorbing the light around it. Even the stars seemed to fade near its surface. The cub growled, stepping in front of Mara protectively. Mara clenched her fists. "So that's the darkness they warned about." Her calm crackled. A deep, static-filled voice whispered, "Human signal detected. You lit the beacon. You should not have." The voice sent chills down her spine. "Who are you?" she demanded. "We are what comes after the light dies." The words echoed across the desert, vibrating through the sand. The cub roared, its voice booming like thunder. Golden fire surrounded it, its form shifting again. Now twice its size, sleek and radiant. The bond between it and Mara blazed brighter than ever. Mara raised her rifle, even though she knew bullets couldn't hurt something that large. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. "We protect the flame," the voice hissed back. "Then you will burn with it." The ship opened its lower hull. Dozens of dark pods fell from the sky, slamming into the sand with explosions of red smoke. From those pods, tall figures emerged, armored in black, eyes glowing crimson. Mara whispered, "They're not machines." The cub's growl deepened. "Old enemies." The ground shook again as the creatures advanced. Mara touched the cub's head. "We can't hold them all off." "Not alone," the cub replied in her mind. It looked toward the glowing flame in the distance, still pulsing, still calling to the stars. And then from the horizon, light appeared. Dozens of blue streaks fell from the sky. Ships, sleek and silent, descending like comets. Mara gasped. The Guardians? The alien ships hovered above the battlefield. Their hulls gleamed gold and silver, bearing the same flame symbol that had appeared on the helmet. One of them spoke through her comm, a voice filled with calm authority. "Human and Guardian, your bond awakened us. The last spark has become the beacon." Mara smiled through tears. "You came. You fought for the light. Now we fight beside you." The sky exploded into chaos. Guardian ships unleashed beams of energy on the invading shadow army. The desert turned into a storm of light and fire. Mara ran forward, firing her rifle, the cub racing beside her like a streak of gold lightning. Every shot she took was guided by the cub's mind. Their bond now won. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. Above, Guardian ships clashed with the massive black vessel. Each hit tore pieces from it, but it didn't fall. The shadow creature roared, a sound like a dying star. "Light cannot last forever," it thundered. The cub leapt onto a tall dune, eyes glowing brighter than the sun. Flame never dies. It released a massive pulse of golden light, and every Guardian ship mirrored it, amplifying the wave. Mara shielded her eyes as the sky turned white. A deafening silence followed. When the light faded, the black ship was gone. Only drifting ash and fading red sparks remained in the upper atmosphere. The darkness was defeated. Mara fell to her knees, breathless, tears streaming down her face. The cub landed softly beside her, fur flickering gently with fading gold light. She placed a hand on its head. "We did it. Together," the cub replied. From the horizon, the Guardian ships hovered low, silent but radiant. One descended closer, and a figure stepped out, tall and armored in shining blue light. Mara recognized the shape from the helmet's message. The Guardian bowed slightly. "You carried the last flame. You saved what even we could not." Mara looked around at the glowing landscape, the reawakened world, the sparks rising into the stars. She smiled. No, we saved it. The Guardian's helm tilted. You are now part of the light network. Wherever the dark rises again, we will answer together. Mara glanced at the cub, who looked back with soft golden eyes. She nodded. Then let's make sure the darkness never comes back. The Guardian extended a hand toward her. A beam of light surrounded her and the cub, lifting them slowly from the sand. The cub's voice whispered in her mind, calm and warm. Many worlds. Waiting, she smiled. Then let's go save them. As the beam carried them toward the stars, the camera of the universe seemed to pull back, showing the desert below, the still-burning flame, and hundreds of other lights awakening across distant planets. The legacy of the Guardians had begun anew, and this time, a human stood among them.